Um, before we get into the meat of today's topic, we're going to talk about cooperation and shared power and authority. I just wanted to share a really good reminder I got this last weekend of, some of that basic therapy mental health stuff, that's so basic that when you hear it, you roll your eyes, but in reality, it makes a big difference. So I'm doing a mountain bike race in a week. It's the first race that I've ever done. And my goal is to show up and have fun, not win, because I will not. I'll probably be the slowest person on the course. But this last weekend, a few riders got together and we hired a mountain bike coach to come out and ride with us and give us some pointers on how to ride efficiently, how to do some of the technical parts of the trail. And I always love learning from experts, because uh, experts to me are people who know the craft, they know the things so well that they know what's not important to pay attention to. So it was really cool to watch this instructor, the way we did it. He would ride behind each one of us, and as we're riding, he would give pointers. Like at one point, he's telling me, I have what's called a dropper post on my bike. I can hit a button and my seat can go up and down. You tell me, use your dropper post and use your gears. You can, there's no rules against engaging those. And I rode 10 times better with that. Um, at one section, it's what's called a rock garden. So you have the regular dirt trail, and then this is a section where the dirt trail is, infused with a ton of big rocks. Rock gardens are fun. Rock gardens are challenging. So he sends us through, and he's standing on the side, watching us go through. And he said, ride through this direction, ride back, and then we'll talk about what happened. So we all ride through, and I'm 15 feet into the rock garden. My front tire hits a big rock. I didn't see it in time. I didn't lift up. So I get thrown back in my bike, and, have to put my feet down and kind of walk around this section. I get to the end, and, I do this slow fall, just off balance, slow fall off the trail. The bike comes on top of me as these other riders go by, really not embarrassing at all. Uh, and then I ride it back through, and we get to the other end, and he said, so what did you guys notice? And everyone's kind of quiet. And he said, everybody held their breath as they went through. Why are you holding your breath? And we've been spending the day talking about good position on the bike, like keeping your body limber. And nobody has a good answer. Like, well, it's stressful. And it gives about 5 other points. And he said, just pick one of those points to focus on and go through the rock garden. So because I'm not a very good technical writer, I ignored the 5 other points. And I said, well, I can just breathe through this. So I ride back through this section, didn't have to put my feet down, got through just fine. And all I did was focus on my breathing. And that became kind of a mantra, kind of a meditation for the rest of the course. I don't know what else to do, but I'll just breathe through this. It's the best writing I've ever done. And he pulled me aside later, and he said, I hope you feel like you got your money's worth, because I really am not trying to be like cheap saying just breathe. But as with most things in life, it makes a big difference if you just breathe. And I'm thinking to myself, like, well, I know this, like I say this all the time to people, take a deep breath. And it sounds trite, but just something I wanted to share. Speaking of relationship skills, if you get stuck or you're getting tense, just breathe and see what happens. You'll probably greet most situations about 15 times more effective if you'll just slow down and let yourself breathe. Last time we talked about fairness, justice, and sensitivity. We're going to talk about cooperation and shared power as principles of secure functioning. So things that make a relationship a place where 2 people want to be and 2 people can do well in. So first, cooperation. In the couples that I work with, most people look at cooperation as compromise, and they are not the same thing. In fact, there's a distinction that I think is really, really important. I've said this before, that compromise is a focus on what we're giving up. And it's just human nature. If you're in a situation that requires you to shave this off, not do that, hold back here, hold back there, it's just a matter of time before that builds a lot of resentment and you don't want to participate in that situation anymore. So cooperation, if we break the word down, it's a cooperation. This is two people working together on something. Um, Cooperation is not the same as compromise. Cooperation is closer to collaboration, um, or negotiation. And I've talked about this before. In a negotiation, instead of looking at what we're giving up, we're looking at what we have to give to better the situation. In cooperation, we're also looking at what we have to offer that may provide a point of expertise, a point of competency, a benefit. And in cooperative relationships, we become willing to give that regardless of what anybody else is giving. Because in cooperative relationships, the goal is to involve everybody in the group or everybody in the system in getting the task done. It's not to get the task done. So when we have a cooperative framework, our focus is on what we have to give, and what the mutual benefit is. Most people's fear around that is, well, what if I get screwed? Like, what if I give and I'm taken advantage of? What if I give and it's not appreciated? What if I give and I'm criticized? You might, and you probably have been screwed by that before. You're probably coming from an honest place. This has happened before. The thing about principles that govern our relationships or govern secure functioning is they're supposed to be hard. If they weren't hard for us to do, we wouldn't have to have them be a principle. We wouldn't have to have them be a guidepost, because we would just do it. And it's interesting to me as I was thinking through this, there's a lot of things that are basic to human functioning and human behavior that we actually have to make goals and principles, like get enough sleep, eat nutritiously, drink enough water. These are all things that we would think would come really naturally, but they don't. We have to go back and focus on basics, and sometimes we really have to push ourselves. I know that when I'm stressed, or when I'm binging a show on Netflix that I'm really, really into, it's not really easy for me to say, all right, sleep is important. I've got to cut off time here. I need to rest and relax now. The reason why I think it's important to be challenged by our principles, like cooperation, is because without being challenged, all you're left to are your biological and psychological baselines, which are not great for relationships. Biologically and psychologically, we are wired to desire relationships, but we're not wired to be good at them. Unless you're an infant. Infants are wired to be good at relationships because their deal is to signal what they need and to do that consistently. But as we get older, we also have to do some giving as well. It's not just about signaling and receiving. It's really about giving. So if you're not pushing yourself hard in relationships, you're not pushing yourself to do hard things, you're relying on your biology and your baseline psychology to do the right thing with respect to another person. And very rarely will it do that. One person psychology is natural for us. Two-person psychological systems are things that we have to work at, and we actually have to operate a little bit counter to our biology. Instead of just coming from a standpoint of what's best for me and how do I protect myself, we come from how can I help the group, or how can I help this other person, or how can I protect this other person. The second point we're going to talk about today is shared power and authority. So this I think is pretty critical to secure functioning. It's one that everybody has a blind spot in. So think back to a relationship interaction where somebody comes to you with a problem or a grievance, and they tell you what their problem or grievance is, and your initial reaction is, I don't know what you're talking about, or that doesn't make sense to me. I would wager that everybody in this meeting right now, or everyone who's watching it, has had that experience at least once, being on both sides of that. Being on the side of, I don't see what the problem is, and being on the side of, there's a big problem, why don't you see it? When that happens, that is a 100% guaranteed sign that there is a power differential in that relationship. Because usually the people who are in power, the person who's in power, is not bothered by inequity and imbalance, because the balance is in their favor. They have advantage. So power differentials are very, very normal in relationships. Again, they're kind of the default setting, they happen. There's also a distinction between what power and authority is. Power is our ability to do things. Authority is our ability to decide what gets done. So, for example, let's say that you lived on a street that, some rowdy teenagers drive up and down way too fast. Again, I would guess that most of the people in this room, they have the power to build a speed bump or put tire spikes in the road, meaning you have the ability, you could do it. However, if you do that, the city or the county where you live is going to come along and say, you can't put that in the road. That's public space. You need to take that out. So while you have the power to do something, you may not have the authority to do something. Shared power and authority is really, really important in intimate relationships, because if you're in a position where you have power but no authority, you're going to build a lot of resentment. There's going to be a lot of unfair weight on your shoulders, because your job is to get things done, but you have no say in how to get it done. If you are in a position where you have the authority, but you don't feel like you have the power to carry it out, again, you're going to have a lot of resentment. It's going to cause problems. Anything less than shared power and authority is a dictatorship or a slavery situation. That means that both parties are not fully empowered and they're not fully present. I have worked with couples in the past around this shared power thing, and one of the containers or one of the challenges I put them in to get to the root of what's going on is I go back to a secure functioning rule, a secure functioning principle, where if we're not in agreement on a decision or something that needs to get done, we don't do it. We don't move forward unless we're in complete agreement. What that exposes really, really quickly is who's used to plowing forward without regard to the other one, and who's used to going along to get along. Going along to get along will not work in a relationship long term. Again, there's too much resentment there. There's too much inequity. There's too much unfairness too much of the time. So one of the key takeaways, oh, sorry, I just saw in the chat, somebody asked to repeat what power is and authority is. So power is the ability to do things. Authority is the ability to decide what to do. There's that. The takeaway I want you guys to take from both of those, there's not really an operation thing here. Usually I have like some discrete, do this, that'll get you in alignment here. These are more things that the takeaway I'd want you to take is more, a lot of us think we're way better at these than we actually are. So, if you were to ask a room full of 100 people, who's a good team player, you'd probably have upwards of 80% of people saying, I'm a great team player. However, your experience on working in teams is not 80% of the people you work with are great team players. So the best point of reference for how you're doing with cooperation and shared power and authority is the experience of your partners, the people that you have these intimate relationships with, or these relationships that important work has to get done. If the people you work with don't think you're a good cooperator, you're probably not a good cooperator. If the people you work with don't think that you share power or authority or step into your power and authority the way you need to, you probably have problems there. This is another thing that's really hard about two-person systems, is we can't rely on our own perspective. Because human beings, it's not because they're evil or anything like that. We're always self-serving. We're always self-referential. So the way we see things is we tend to see things in a way that favors us. We need other people to help balance that out, not to take us down a peg or two, but to help us see what is really going on. So I guess my challenge would be to, if you're in this spot in your relationship, have a conversation with your partner around, how do I do with cooperation and how do I do with sharing power and authority with you? If you're not in a relationship that's in that point or in that position, but you're in a 12-step group or you have a sponsor or something like that, talk with your sponsor, talk with someone in your group about this, get some feedback on how you do, so that you can notice some of those things that you do automatically that you may not realize are problematic, so you can improve your relationships.
Thank you, Jon. If you have questions about this or anything else to do with relationships and recovery, type them into the Q&A feature. We've got one in the chat feature that I'll get to in just a second. I love you pointing out the difference between cooperation and compromise. And I know you've done this before, but today it's sunk in for me in a way that it didn't before. So I just kind of wanted to repeat it. You know, cooperation is two people working together, collaborating, and each of us brings what we can to the table to make things better. And we do that kind of without an expectation that the other person will bring something equal. I mean, it's nice if they do, but we're not going to get mad if they don't. We're going to bring what we can to the table. I see a hand raised. If you want to ask a question, type it into the Q&A or the chat feature rather than raising hands. And whereas compromises, you know, I've got to give something up so that we can move forward. You use the language, what was it, going along to get along, which is a recipe for resentment. And compromise is always kind of a recipe for resentment. You know, I've heard people say, you know, a good compromise is when nobody's happy. Whereas a good cooperation sounds like when everybody's at least kind of happy.
What an awful target, right? We're looking to make everybody mad as a result of what we decide.
Yeah, if everybody's pissed off, we got a good result. No, I don't like that. And I love cooperation. You know, one of the things that I'll tell people, you know, couples need to find a way to stop fighting each other and start fighting the problem. You know, they need to recognize they're on the same team. And I love what can I bring to the table for to help us fight the problem, whatever the problem is. And I think this is a lot of what you're talking about today.
Yeah, it's a very different mindset, because in a two-person system, we're always looking at what we can give. In one-person systems, we're looking at what are we getting and am I getting enough? And again, that's biological. You know, I grew up in a home with 6 children. So when dinner was put on the table, like, you dove for your favorite food and you made sure you got your helping, because if you waited too long, you might not have gotten it, you know? And that's biological, that's natural. Most of what we do naturally is terrible for our relationships. That's one of the reasons why we don't put children in, you know, marriage relationships, or we don't put children in relationships that make big decisions that impact the world, because we have to grow up a bit. We have to mature a bit. We have to kind of get our base stable before we can start looking at doing some of these relationships that require us to be uncomfortable in order to be effective. That requires to go against some of our programming, some of our biology, in order to get the work of the relationship done.
Yeah, and then I like what you said. You talked about shared power and authority, how we all have a blind spot with this. And I'll just use an example from my own life. You know, my mother is the queen of the blind spot with this. You know, I'll just say, I'm angry about this, and she'll go, well, I understand that you're angry, but I really don't see why. And her take on it is, I'm your mother. You know, and my take on it is, I'm 55. It's like, I've done really well for myself. I don't need you, you know, being my mother right now. And, you know, but you hit it. It's the power differential. I mean, she still thinks she's in charge of me, and I don't like that. And she still thinks she's in charge of my sister. It's the same. My sister gets the same response, but I'm your mother. And it's like, that's the justification. When you run into that in a relationship, I mean, it might be, but I'm the breadwinner, so I should get to decide how we spend the money. What can a couple do more than being aware of that?
Yeah, a lot of couples, they get into these fights, they get into these situations because they're trying to be right rather than doing what works. So when we get really married to a role, well, I'm the breadwinner, or, you know, I'm the one who makes decisions about the house. We're in tunnel vision with this role we have, with this job we have to do, rather than recognizing the actual job you have to do is assisting the person across from you being as safe and secure as possible, feeling the very best that they can while staying in your integrity. So when you have that kind of focus, the roles really don't matter. Who does the work, who makes the money, who makes the decisions, that really doesn't matter. What matters is the decisions that we arrive at, and what ends up coming into the family is actually beneficial for the family. So, it's, I see this, I see this in my workaholic clients. They may not understand why their family is so upset with them and their job, because they make like just insane amounts of money. They don't have to want for anything. If you're just focused on the role as a breadwinner, he's a great breadwinner, but that's not all you are. You're also a father. You're also a husband. You're a wife. You're a mother. Um, you're a partner. That's an important role too. And if you get too locked into a role, you try to do every job through that role. We I mentioned this on the webinar last time. We adopted a baby about a month ago, and it became really clear to me, our adoption attorney, he's probably one of the best in our states, came very highly recommended. um, he he also thought that he was, full of lots of parenting wisdom and marriage wisdom. He's an attorney, not a therapist, and I would know the difference because I'm a therapist, not an attorney. um, so when he stayed in his lane of, I'm doing the attorney thing, I love the guy. When he veered out of his lane and tried to take on a role that wasn't needed. At one point in the interview, my wife actually, she laid her head down on his desk like this, and she kept it there for probably like 7 minutes. He didn't stop. He didn't say a thing. When we get too focused on the role, we miss what's going on in the relationship. We miss what's actually happening in front of us, and bonds are deteriorated that way. So in marriages, when we get locked in that, but I'm this, but I'm that, you're putting that role before your partner's safety and security. Is it more important for you to be a good partner, what you think is a good breadwinner, or is it more important that this person that I've committed to and me, we feel safe and secure with each other? Because the answer to that question will determine which direction you go to find solutions in.
That resonates a lot with me. So thank you. Okay. This is from our chat feature, the first one to pop in, regarding mother enmeshment. If my husband has consistently called me names, especially when in active addiction, that do not resonate with me at all regarding who I believe I am, but do sound just like his mom, i.e. mean, manipulative, a game player, insecure, jealous, etc., could that be an enmeshment symptom? I've read Ken Adams' books and see my husband in there, but he does not see it. Yet when he criticizes me with these words, it feels so far from who I am, but so accurate to who she is. Can you speak to this at all? Thank you.
Yeah, that projection, that can be really common in English relationships. In fact, the title of this book, When He's Married to Mom, I think it's perfect for a lot of reasons. One of them is it speaks to the again, confusion of roles. Who am I actually married to here? Am I playing out my relationship with my mother, or am I playing out my relationship with my spouse? So I think it's chapter 8 in When He's Married to Mom that's written for spouses, and I think it has a lot of good guidance on this. So there's not one jujitsu move that you can do here that turns on the light bulb for your spouse and has them recognizing what they may be doing. This is it's kind of a longer, I hate to use the word game, but it's a longer game here. And one of the big things that he talks about in that chapter is, if you're seeing something and you believe that it's related to enmeshment and you want your spouse to explore it, you have to be prepared for a couple things. First, you have to be prepared to make a very clear request of them. And you have to be prepared to follow through if that request is not met. So we're talking like the example he gives over and over again is, I would like you to go to therapy, and I would like you to work on these issues. I would like you to work on what I see or what I feel as you have me confused with your mother. And I'd like you to go for 6 months. And at the end of 6 months, I need to see some improvement on this issue. Or I'm ready to be done with our relationship because this has become intolerable. Because without that leverage, and again, I hate to say leverage because it's not a game thing, but really, if you're at the end of your rope on this and you can't do it anymore, you have to be ready to back that up, because he may never move. He may never move from that position. A lot of these states, if I see my mother in you, it's very self-serving. Like we're talking about these one person versus two person systems. It's very advantageous to him that he has a place to take out his anger, to confront mom without confronting mom. He's sitting pretty, so to speak. You, however, are not. So this is where boundaries and spelling out clearly what you need and what you want and what you're prepared to do if your partner can't provide that. I would say it's kind of the last recourse. And a lot of the guys who come to our workshops, they come under those situations. You know, their partners have read the books, and they come into those situations. You know, the good news is if he values the relationship, if that idea of losing the relationship carries any weight for him at all, he goes into therapy with some decent motivation. And it's not this nebulous, you better get this or else. It's, I want to see some improvement in this amount of time. Please see what you can do. It's a fair ask. It's a, you know, in the context of what you could be doing, it's a gentle ask too. These kind of realizations, they take time. And so that's where, you know, when I said there's no jujitsu move here that changes it, saying, I want you to read this book, don't you see yourself in it? That's actually hard to come by. Giving a little bit of a longer runway, being really specific about the issue you see, attacking the behavior, not your partner. When you say these things about me, I feel like you're talking about your mother. I feel like you have me confused with her. That feels unfair to me. I don't like that. I can't, you know, I don't feel like being real loving and close to you when I feel like you give me the energy that you have towards her. And then, you know, lay out the timeline that you would like to see some improvement on, and then be ready to take action for yourself if the improvement that you need to see is not there. So that may look like we're going to need to separate, or I'll be considering ending the relationship. Um, don't set yourself up with a threat that you think is going to get his attention. Set yourself up with an option that you know you can follow through on. That might take some preparation on your part too.
Yeah, and I just want to say that I think Jon's answer 100% transfers to when you see an addiction in your partner or your child or whoever, and they don't see it. It's the same kind of thing. You have to kind of approach it, not piecemeal, but you've got to set some boundaries that are, you know, that you're willing to stick to. Mm-hmm. During another men's group I attended this week, we discussed poking the bear and how scary it can be to face one's partner sometimes. Frankly, it's tough to go to my partner when I just know he's going to stonewall or worse. What should my mindset be prior to leaning into a potential conflict? Interestingly, I don't know if this question is from an addict or from a betrayed partner, and I don't know that it matters, but does it matter? And anyway, so okay, so go ahead.
Yeah, no, I don't think it matters. The first mindset, please, well, unless you really understand bears, don't see your partner as a bear, please. I spent 5 years in my.
I think this is a gay couple, so the bear thing may be part of their language, but probably not what he's talking about here.
It could be a description of your partner that your partner likes and embraces too. So could be a lot of things. But if poking the bear has a negative connotation to you, please change how you see your spouse. I was a guide in Yellowstone and Teton for 4 summers in my late teens, early 20s. And as part of that, I had to know about bears, and I had to know how to be safe around bears. Just a couple weeks ago, you know, prior to baby coming, she came as a bit of a surprise. So our summer plans changed drastically. We were going to do a camping and a rafting trip in Teton National Park, and we were going to take my in-laws with us. My mother-in-law was very nervous about bears, rightly so. And you know, she was, you know, reading all sorts of things online, and you know, she would text or call a couple times a week. Okay, well, what about this? What are we going to do about this? And I told her, here's how bears work, and here's how bear precautions work. I've literally taken hundreds of people through the backcountry, and I've not yet had anyone mauled by a bear. And part of the reason why I can be that relaxed is, again, I know how bears work. I know how their psychology works. Bears are not evil carnivores that are out to destroy things. They're just like you and me. They're animals that are trying to make their way, and they have a specific parameter that they work in, and there's certain things that they can't resist. And when you put them in a situation where they're not designed to work well, they won't work well. They won't play by the rules. So the first part of the mindset is, if bear is a threatening thing to you, don't think of your partner as a bear. You have to think of your partner in the position that they're in. And if you are, if you're addicted here, you have to think of your partner in the position that you've put them in. If you're a partner, think about what's being asked of your partner in recovery. So the vast majority of sex addicts that I work with, they are not relationship masters. They never have been. They don't totally get people. So in recovery, they're being asked to be very empathetic and very attuned, which first of all, they struggle with, and they're being asked to do that with someone who is enraged with them, rightly so. So it's an uphill battle for both of you. It's a really, really hard thing to be in a relationship for both of you. If you can understand some of that context and have a little empathy. I was talking with a guy this morning. We've really been working on his level of honesty with his spouse. And one of the reasons he cited before why he didn't do it is exactly what's said here. Like, I know there's going to be a blow up. It's going to be hard. Like, why would I do this? So he had a relapse in the last couple of weeks, and he told his spouse about it. And he said, for the first time, usually, when she would get really angry or upset, I would throw up my hands and I would leave the room. And he said, for the first time, I saw her and her background, and I understood why she was hurting the way that she did. Her father cheated on her mother serially. And so when he uses porn, or, when he looks at other people, it's really, really triggering for her. He said it took about 5 days where we were not talking to each other. Occasionally she'd check in and say, well, this is what I'm feeling now, but I can't talk anymore. And he said, for that 5 days, I was able to have the attitude of, you take the time you need. I know I put you in a really tough position. I know this is really hard for you. He said after that 5 days, they started to thaw out a bit. And he said, and we're not just going back to normal, pretending like everything's okay. We're actually talking about feelings. We're talking about what's happened. The reason why he's able to do that is because he's not just looking at well, you're doing this, angry thing or the shutting off thing, and that's hard for me. He's looking at why she's doing it. He's getting some context. He's finding a bit of himself in there, and he's able to have some understanding. So I have a piece of art out in my waiting room that says, people do well if they can. And that's one of the ways that I choose to see the world. I know that, if we were to take a poll in the chat room, you guys could all probably give me really good examples of people who don't do well and they can. I don't care whether it's true or not. I think it's far more helpful for me in relationships with people to see it that way. If you could do better, you'd do better. So when your partner, when you come to them with something scary, something big, and they blow up, or they stonewall, or they're angry with you, see what it looks like through that lens. If this person could do better with this, I think they would. This may be a representation of the best they can do right now. Because just like you and whatever your recovery is, whether you're a partner or a spouse, your recovery is incremental, bit by bit. Why would your partners be any different? They get to have some struggle, and some struggle might be beneficial for them. So coming back to that place of compassion, coming back to that place of cooperation, mutual support, it may be the task in front of us right now is you're holding something that's way heavier for you than it is for me. Well, how do I help with that? Maybe I don't sit back and criticize you for how much you're struggling to carry that. Maybe I understand that you weren't made to carry that, or that's not something you're used to.
Yeah, now I also like the advice that I tend to give a lot, which is remember that you're on the same team. Even if you screwed up, you're on the same team. And let's, if you take that mindset in there, we can work through this. And I love your example, like 5 days later, still not really talking, but working forward and making progress. Sometimes it takes that.
He said that was one of the first 5 days of his marriage, but he said, I think we're doing something that's working because we're closer now.
Yeah.
It's hard that it's taken 8 days to get here, but we got here.
Yeah, and I was home not that long ago. I did something that really pissed my sister off. I pushed a button of a childhood wound, and I knew I did it, and I knew as words were coming out of my mouth, I was like, oh shit, you should not be. And I had to go to her later and sit down and really make my 10th step amends, but it was much, much more than that. It was really kind of forcing her to understand that I understood exactly what I did and I was sorry, and I knew why it hurt her, the way it hurt her. And it was a rough couple of hours. And she doesn't have a lot of the tools that I have from being in webinars like this with you and other people. But we are much closer now for having had that conversation. And we both have said we're so grateful for that. She's like, oh, you understand me in a way that I didn't think anybody else ever did. I was like, well, I was there for the abuse. So yeah, but so yeah. Okay, next question here. In terms of cooperation and shared authority and power, how does this look in a relationship where one of the partner is addicted? In other words, how much input does the betrayed partner have in the addict's recovery?
That's a really good question. So I would actually broaden that, because it's not just the addicted partner's recovery that affects the relationship. There's at least three things going on, and all sorts of permutations of those three things going on. There's the recovery of the addicted person, there's the recovery of the betrayed partner, and then there's the recovery of the coupleship. So in instances where there's betrayal, the power is going to look a little bit different. It's going to be skewed for a little while until we restore fairness and justice. So what that looks like is the person who's done the betraying, they are not in a position to set terms for how the relationship is going to go yet. The person who's been betrayed, they are the ones who get to set terms for, this is what you must do, this is what I must see in order for me to consider forgiving you, having you back in the good graces, having you as an equal partner in our relationship. That imbalance in the beginning is really, really important. Again, it's not a permanent state. And if you're in the position of power there, like any other position of power, if you abuse it, you'll lose your audience. So the partner has the vast majority, the bulk of the say in what's going to make our relationship work right now. And when the addicted partner hits those benchmarks again and again, and they prove to the partner, it's not that I can do all these things, it's actually what they're proving is, I'm listening to you, your concerns are valid to me, your feelings are valid to me, and I want to help you feel better with that. When that's being hit again and again, and there's trust coming back into the relationship, then it's more of that shared power, shared authority. Okay, now that you have made up your debt to me, now that you have brought balance and justice back to this, what are we going to do about us? So as far as an individual's recovery is concerned, I really like the model, instead of what's right for recovery, I like the council of care model. There's a lot of different people who have a perspective on that and who I think have something valid to say there. There's a sponsor, there's a therapist, there may be close friends, and certainly a spouse. So when I'm meeting with someone who's in recovery, when I'm meeting with an individual who's in recovery, fairly early in the process, I like to invite them to bring their spouse to a session. And then I have a session where most of it is I'm talking to the spouse about the person who's in recovery, about what their concerns are. What are you seeing here? What are you experiencing? What do you need this person to accomplish? Because, he or she is telling me they want this relationship to continue. I don't bring a spouse in if a person's saying, and I want my relationship to end. I don't do that. But if they're saying, I want my relationship to continue, I want this to work, that has to be folded into what the recovery process is. I think that's far better done when it's from that council of care standpoint. All right, this is one of your goals. These are your spouse's concerns. How are we going to get you there? I think it's an unfair burden for a lot of spouses to say, I have to figure out what good recovery is for my partner, and I have to make sure that they do it. That's a lot of work. That's an unfair burden. And it puts the spouse in a position where they don't get to be hurt. They have to be vigilant. So again, it's that cooperation, it's that collaboration thing. What's the work that we need to get done, and what can you bring to the table? I think it's 100% okay for a spouse to say, as part of your recovery, I need you to be 100% sober. I get that maybe this is incremental and there's going to be progress, but not perfection. But your end goal needs to be, I'm sober. I don't do this anymore. That's, and again, that's a cooperative thing. That's not. I don't think it works very well for one, either the addict or the spouse, to say, here are the terms of my recovery set in stone. Nobody gets to question this. I don't think that helps, because recovery is organic. Recovery is growing. So if you can find someone who can help facilitate, you can find a place to air some of your concerns, maybe even grievances. And again, just like we did with the first question, in that spirit of, this is something I need to see you make progress on, or this relationship is not very tenable for me. You give the options, and then you, as the spouse, you have to have a backup plan for if it doesn't go according to what you need. And you have to be able to follow through on that backup plan.
Okay, so next question here. How does what we're talking about here, this shared power authority dynamic, play out between a client and a therapist, where there really is an imbalance of power, or a lawyer and client, like you talked about earlier, any other relationship where there is an imbalance of power?
Good question. So I have a couple of things coming to mind. So by nature of my job as a therapist, there's a power imbalance with everybody who walks into my office, and that power imbalance continues throughout the course of the relationship, because the very nature of the relationship is it's focused on the client, not the therapist. So, I ask my clients a lot of revealing questions and a lot of exposing questions. They don't get to ask the same thing of me. Or if they do, I get to say, we're not focusing on me, we're focusing on you. So there is a power imbalance there. I would say some things that I see happen in therapy, just because there's a power imbalance does not mean that the relationship is going to be unjust. As a therapist, I feel like it's my job to see how my client's doing and how they're responding. And instead of staying in my lane of, this is what must happen with you, or this is what works, I really have to get feedback from the client. A good two-person system between a therapist and a client is that the therapist is attentive to the client's concerns and needs, and they're adaptive. They also, just like in any other intimate relationship, we hold the line of the work of the relationship. I don't have people who come to therapy who declare, I'm here to be stagnant and not be challenged, and I just want you to make me feel good. If I have those people call in, I refer them to somebody else because they're not a good match for me. So again, part of that two-person system is, when we've identified what the work of the relationship is, we hold the relationship to that work. So that's where, in that two-person system, sometimes a therapist can be jarring. Sometimes they can be really direct. Sometimes your therapist is going to make you mad. If it's in service of that goal of, I want to get better, and you can see that aligns, that's useful. If that feels like it comes, or if that's coming from a place of meanness or exasperation or anger, that's not useful. That's an abuse of power. So I hope that offers a little perspective on that. We could talk for hours and hours about that.
Yeah. I think this next question, it's actually a comment, but there's a question that follows, is in relation to your artwork in the waiting room about, if people can do better, they will do better. Sorry, I do not agree. Some people are evil. My former spouse was really out to hurt me, psychopath, to punish me. If I wouldn't obey him, very arch and cruel. That goes on for a minute. The question is, tomorrow it will be 10 months that this monster is gone. Even though I find it very hard, I want to celebrate with myself. Do you have any tips? They were together for 16 years, which was a hell of a ride, and now it's a hell of a ride on a healing journey. So congratulations for being out of an abusive relationship. Any thoughts about what to do now, Jon?
Yeah. First I'll comment. I'm so glad that you disagree with that, honestly. Like I said, anyone could present me all sorts of compelling evidence. In most relationships, I would say in every relationship, if abuse is on the table, the rules of engagement for relationships do not apply. So if you're in an abusive relationship, anything I'm talking to you about here, don't do it. Because in an abusive relationship, if you stay in it, you will die, either physically or spiritually or mentally. And the number one goal of people healing is to stay alive so that you have a chance at healing. If you're in an abusive relationship, you likely won't get healing to happen. So take everything I'm saying and throw it aside and do what you need to do to survive. Get help with that. Now to the question, any suggestions to celebrate myself? This could be really, really fun. So I have a couple of avenues coming to mind. I think it depends on what it is you need to experience. What's the experience you need to give yourself? You may be looking at 10 months and saying, like you said, it's been a hell of a ride. You may be looking at, I need to celebrate the fact that I can take my foot off the gas and I can relax. So you may do something very soft, very healing, very, very personal with you. You may be, like the Munchkins in Wizard of Oz, and it may be Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead, and you might want to throw a party, and you might want to celebrate the fact that you're free and you can do things now that you were not able to do under your ex's tyranny. And so you might have a bit of a screw you party. You got mad at this kind of music. You didn't like this kind of food. I'm going to listen to that kind of music and I'm going to eat that kind of food. It all depends on what the experience is you need to have. This is not the same at all, but I really like this principle for celebrations. Several years ago, I did not like my birthdays because my attitude was, it's everybody's job to celebrate me the right way. And I have to judge at the end of the day, did I get celebrated adequately or not? And when I realized this was my attitude, I realized why I didn't like my birthdays. It's because I was constantly disappointed. And so I decided to flip the script, and I made the plans for my birthday, and I invited people along who I wanted to celebrate. And then anything anyone else wanted to do, my family knows this is the rule. You don't make plans, but like you don't plan a party on my birthday. I plan my birthday. If you want to do something later, I get a bonus birthday. And you can celebrate me the way you want later, and I'll show up and be grateful. Whatever you do, make sure that it's coming from your own hands. It's what you feel is right. It's what you want to experience, not what anybody tells you you should do or you should be experiencing.
Yeah, I like that answer. All my answers involve pudding, but I like pudding. That's how I would celebrate. I would go get some pudding. My husband uses "I don't feel safe with you" as his reason for not wanting to engage in conversations about things that I need more clarity on, as in who he is in recovery, who he was before recovery, what he's struggling with, what his successes are, etc. I have told him that I need to be able to talk about these things, and by him not giving me this information, I feel that he is still hiding. How do I get what partners deserve, the truth, if he pulls this "I don't feel safe with you" card? Is it normal for the addict to not have to tell his truth until he feels safe? So, John?
Yeah, that goes to my comment earlier of the power imbalance. When you've betrayed, I actually think trust is destroyed on both sides of a relationship when there's betrayal, and it's not because that the betrayed spouse has done anything to violate trust. It's when you've done something so awful and so shameful, you often have the belief nobody could love me now, nobody could like me now. So it's 100% common for the addicts that I work with to feel this way. However, and this is something I hammer pretty hard with them. If you want this relationship to succeed, if you want this relationship to survive, you're going to have to put your agenda on hold for a little while, because your spouse is not the one who came and kicked you in the teeth with a betrayal. You did that to them. And so until justice happens, until fairness is restored, in that your partner knows what's happened, your partner knows you're not holding any secrets, you're really on equal footing, I would strongly encourage you not to lobby too much for what you want in this relationship, because that's like kicking somebody in the teeth and asking them to put a Band-Aid on the toe that got cut on their tooth. Like, just not fair. Don't do it. I think, like you're describing there, that's a place to hide, and that's a fundamental lack of understanding in the imbalance of power that's created in an addiction. I hope your spouse is working with someone who's competent. I hope you guys are working with a marriage therapist who's competent and able to help you guys navigate that. If you're not, that's a good place to start. Get some help in that structure in restoring integrity and honesty to the relationship. And correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, you guys at Seeking Integrity, you do some intensives for couples, is that right?
We do. Yeah, you can go onto our seekingintegrity.com website and click the workshops button. And there is one for couples, and it's really, really good. Susie LeBrock does it. Way worth doing. So yeah, highly recommended. I also, I mostly deal with addicts. And, I get the addict end of this. It's like, well, if I tell her this, she's going to get mad, and, or she's asking about this, and I've told her before. And my answer always is, are you sober today? Yeah. Are you doing your recovery work? Yeah. Then what are you hiding? Answer the question. I was just like, what are you hiding? Why are you hiding it? It's just an old habit that's hard to break sometimes, or they really are hiding something sometimes. So yeah, I understand the frustration of the betrayed partner who can't get the questions answered big time. So I'm going to roll down a little bit. My wife and I are 2.5 years post-discovery. She still does not feel safe, and the betrayal trauma goes to the core of her very being. She works and wants me to go back to work so I can focus, or wants me to not go back to work so I can focus on recovery. She feels when I do start working, she has the say about where I can and can't work. She controls all our money. I have been literally kicked out of the house with no gas in my car, no money for food, and nowhere to go. I've slept in my car dozens of times to avoid or to leave a physical altercation. I cannot go visit a friend or meet one of the brothers in the fellowship to go have coffee, go to lunch, or play 9 holes of golf, even if she knows exactly where I am. She feels she has a right to know 100% about anything to do with my recovery, including any journal meetings, written exercises, Freudian slip. And if I even looked at any woman or had any euphoric recall. I opened a bank account a couple of months ago when she kicked me out with no money. But now she demands I close it, or it's a deal breaker to divorce. Help. So this is kind of this power dynamic where maybe it's out of control.
I won't weigh in on what you should do without hearing what's going on with your spouse. And here's the reason again, when I talked about, in the beginning, you think you're better at this than you are. Our perceptions, our stories, this is human nature, doesn't come from bad, evil people. It's human nature. Your perception will be self-serving. And what I hear a lot in this is, you live with a tyrant, and like you're the victim here. You may be. I don't know. I don't know until I hear from your spouse on what's going on here. So you can put the focus on fighting this out. You can put the focus on trying to get her to change her mind. You could also put the focus on trying to understand where she's coming from and why her reaction is this big. Again, when I go back to that framework I like to come from, people do well if they can. Either she's evil and she wants you to suffer, or if you understand a little more of the background, you might understand why her anger and why her betrayal is manifesting this way. And if you can understand that, you might find some ways you can help her with it, rather than trying to run from the hammer falling over and over again. So that's as far as I'm going to go on that one. I think there's always more to the story there, and look at as much personal responsibility as you can. You can never do too much personal responsibility.
Yeah, and as the addict, you have control over your thinking and your behavior. To a certain extent, you have control over your thinking. You don't have control over her thinking and her behavior and her requests and her needs. So at some point, if it really is untenable, maybe this isn't the right relationship. But again, we do not have enough facts. And even if we had all the facts, neither John nor I would say, get out or stay, or, that's not a decision that anybody can make but you. And I almost wish I hadn't said that. That's why I'm backtracking so fast.
And one more perspective I'd put there. Again, this is if you are addicted and you've betrayed your spouse, you've really created a power imbalance that puts you in a position where I was working with a couple earlier this week where, an apology needed to be made for a relapse. And one of the things that the offending partner realized is he said, this may have been one too many. He said, I don't personally feel like what I've done individually is unforgivable, but the culmination of this, I might have crossed a line now. This might be unforgivable. There may not be terms in the future or now that could put us back in a relationship together. And he said, I have to accept that. I have to accept that what has happened and how my spouse feels about me may be something that instead of me saying, why don't you feel this way, or why don't you do this differently with me, like I might have broken her, and I have to accept the consequences of that. I might have broken our relationship, and I have to accept the consequences of that. That to me, I couldn't have been prouder as a therapist, or even somebody in recovery. That to me, that's a real accepting of responsibility. I can't determine what my partner's response is going to be. I can't say, well, I'm sorry and I've stopped acting out, therefore we ought to have a good relationship. The relationship might not be tenable anymore. That happens sometimes, but again, it's less about who's right and what should happen here, and it's more about what exactly is going on. Clearly, what we say in this question, I don't think you understand where your partner is coming from. I don't either, because I don't know where they're coming from, but that would be something to investigate. Why am I getting this kind of response?
I'm going to skip to the end here. Do you have a men's group at White Pine Recovery? Do you have a couples recovery group at White Pine Recovery? And how can people contact you to find out about those things?
Yeah, so I have a men's group. We meet in person, and it's an advanced recovery group. So it's not a place to start if you're needing to establish sobriety. It's more for guys who've been in a while. I actually refer to a Seeking Integrity's online education group for people who are starting. I don't have a couples group. I really love the idea, but I have not wrapped my head around yet how to do that. Again, there's really good options for intensives with that, but I love the idea. I just need to get the time to get it to come to fruition.
Yeah, and you do all your treatment in person, don't you? Or do you do online stuff?
Yeah, I don't. So anyone I work with, they need the capacity to come in person. Since COVID, we've learned how to make online work a little bit better, but I don't do any just strictly virtual treatment.
So if you're in another area, contact sexandrelationshiphealing.com or Seeking Integrity. Just click the contact us button. Say you're looking for recommendations. Tammy can steer you to a really good therapist in your area usually. We also do
everywhere.
Yeah, she knows everybody everywhere. And we also have, as John mentioned, online work groups for men new to recovery. I teach some of those. Jason Swilling teaches some. Jonah Anderson teaches some. They're a really good way to start in recovery. And then we also have the couples workshop, which is like a weekend thing, which is a great start for couples. And they're all fairly inexpensive. As a matter of fact, very inexpensive in comparison to what else is out there. What a great topic, John. Thank you so much, as always. Incredibly enlightening. Anything you want to say to take us out?
Yeah, thanks everybody for coming. Thanks for the great questions.
Yes. Yeah, we'll be back in 2 weeks. If you have more questions, bring them and we'll be happy to answer them. And we'll see you then.
Bye.